For as long as I can remember, I've always preferred casual video games. Whether they're mini-game collections or life simulators, it can be fun to play games that have basically no stakes. While casual video games have always existed, they did become super popular, on consoles at least, until the mid to late 2000s, with the Nintendo DS and Wii. Some of the most casual and arguably best of these sported the Touch Generation's branding. I owned 3 of these games as a kid, albeit one only counting by about 6 months. The other 2 go way back, so far back that they predate me getting my DS Lite. That's right, these games were bought back in 2007. They're the games I've owned the longest, the game cards at least. You see, when I was a kid, my parents made me throw out all my DS and later 3DS game cases. Why do that when the cases are plastic, who knows? However, I did not have to throw out the manuals, so I kept and still keep all my loose manuals in this big bag of manuals. Until recently though, there were 2 games where I didn't own the manuals, Brain Age 2 and Flash Focus. Let's start with Brain Age 2. Brain Age 2, as the name implies, is a sequel of Brain Age, which was the first Touch Generation's game, with its original printing bearing of a orange logo. Brain Age 2, same as its predecessor, was developed by Nintendo SPD and it released in December 2005 in Japan, just 7 months after the first game, and the summer of 2007 everywhere else. This now ends my knowledge on Brain Age 1. Since I currently do not own that game, I originally assumed that Brain Age Squared was similar to Wii Fit Plus, and that it was more of an addition to the first game rather than a full-on sequel that makes the original obsolete. After all, that's what the back of the box and the title outside North America would lead me to believe. However, it's quite different, at least on the mini-game front. First though, I feel like I have to explain how this game works. The game is played by turning the DS on its side, which is something that will pop up again, don't you worry. Due to this, you have to tell the game whether you are left or right-handed. Then it's time to choose between Quick Play and Daily Train. Oh, and Sudoku, but I'll get to that one later. Daily Train's up first, where the fun starts immediately with selecting a profile. At least you get to write your name on the touchscreen so I can show off my terrible handwriting as a child. After that, the floating polygonal head of Dr. Kawashima, whose work inspired the Brain Age games, rambles on about how Brain Elf is important. Don't get me wrong, I agree with the message, but this is by far the most boring part of the game. Thankfully, it's over pretty quickly and the fun resumes with the start of the mini-games. All of the mini-games in Brain Age 2 are brand new in comparison to the first Brain Age, and are pretty similar to each other at first glance. However, there are enough differences between them that it doesn't feel like I'm doing the same thing about a dozen times. The ones I remember the most are the ones where I'm forced to do simple math. The best part about these is that the game has a hard time reading how I write some of the numbers. There are also mini-games that require the use of the DS microphone rather than the touchscreen. You have to say rock, paper, or scissors in rock, paper, scissors. That's all the use this game has for it. While I like how the DS's touchscreen is used here outside of its ability to read my handwriting, the microphone inclusion feels like the biggest gimmick in any of these games. At least so far. Outside of that though, I love these mini-games. They feel like they can be understood by people of all ages, which was clearly the main goal of Touch Generations. None of them feel too complicated or too similar to each other. No wonder I've consistently played this game for most of my life. Along with these mini-games, there are also some games that are more like side activities than anything else. These include mini-games like Word Scramble and Piano Player. The former requires you to spell out words that get progressively longer from slowly spinning letters, and the latter involves playing notes on a piano. These are also quite fun. Not the easiest of feats even for a casual game. The last mode Brain Age 2 has is coincidentally what I played the least, Sudoku. While you can play a quick round of Sudoku in Quick Play, there's much more in that here, the point of being a game within a game. There are multiple pages of puzzles that total being 100 with 2 different difficulty levels. It even uses the same profiles from Daily Train. To my surprise, I've actually played this before as I quickly discovered a half-finished game that was probably started a half-decade ago. From the mini-games to the presentation to the Sudoku, Brain Age 2 continues to be one of my favorite DS games. It might be an incredibly casual video game meant to drawing people who haven't touched a controller since the 80s, but it'll always have a special place in my heart. Then there's Flash Focus. Flash Focus is a game focused on, as the full title says, training your eyesight. It released throughout 2007 everywhere but Australia, where it released in January 2008. The game was advertised as being associated with Brain Age, with the latter game referenced on the back of the former's box. One thing that separates the 2 games is that Flash Focus was co-developed by Nintendo SPD and Bandai Namco. Oh, and that Brain Age is better. On the surface though, the games are very similar. The interfaces in particular look almost identical. Like Brain Age, Flash Focus requires you to write your name, use stamps on calendar for Daily Train, and the same profile system. It's when you look deeper that the differences, both in presentation and quality, start to show. For one, the game is played with the DS in its usual horizontal angle. Flash Focus also has 2 distinct minigame categories, Sports and Core. I'm going to talk about the sports minigames first since they are objectively cooler, even to someone like myself who doesn't care about any sport other than baseball. It's my lucky day since the first sports minigame I'm confronted with is baseball. This is also the minigame I remember playing the most even when I was younger. In Flash Focus, baseball is played by tapping the yellow square when the ball is inside it. This naturally becomes hard to do when you go up the levels. The game then rates your score on a level from amateur to pro. The rest of the sports games are similar enough. There's football, soccer, basketball. Honestly, not minigames I think about a lot. Table tennis and boxing, on the other hand, are minigames I quite enjoy, much like baseball. While the previously mentioned games have you controlling the players from farther away, these feel a little more personal. They make more of an impact even if I'd rather play either of these minigames on the Wii. I delayed this for long enough, it's time to look at the core minigames. While the sports games were pretty distinct from each other in terms of how exactly you play each one, these blend together way too much. Whenever I think about Flash Focus, the only minigame here that I remember is the one where you have to tap what angles the C's were incorrectly. And even that's fuzzy. The other core minigames are, unsurprisingly, pretty similar to each other. You have to tap the C's or the O's or the boxes the way the game forces you to. Woo. The way they increase the difficulty is the same as the sports minigames, and that only goes up if you are correct. The name was Dr. Kawashima Polygon Floating Head Wannabe, then rambles on for way too long about something that is only sometimes related to what eye ability the minigame just utilized. This also happens after the sports games, but still. The core minigames are all less memorable to me than even the worst ones from Brain Age 2. There's no reason to play more than 2 games here, as they all accomplish the same thing. This is not helped by how they look pretty similar, in comparison to the aesthetics of the sports minigames. Now you might have noticed I have yet to talk about quick play in either of the games I mentioned so far, and there's a simple reason for that. It stinks. In both Brain Age 2 and Flash Focus, quick play is simply a way to jump into a minigame. Note that I didn't say easy. I will give Brain Age 2 a point since it does give you a couple options, while Flash Focus just makes you play one minigame and then that's it. However, both make me feel like I'm playing a demo version of a game I already own. Oh, and I almost forgot. Going back to Daily Train, if you go to the options menu, the 5th option down is the eye relaxation mode. This plays a, in my opinion rather creepy, video where you are instructed to move your eyes around slowly. I'd rather not. I want to make it clear that I don't hate Flash Focus. On its own, it's a fun game with the occasional glaring flaw. Against Brain Age, though, there's not much of a contest. The idea of making an eye equivalent to Brain Age isn't bad at all, but I don't think it worked out well. Unlike Brain Age, Flash Focus never got any sequels on the DS or anywhere else. That could change someday, but is there much you can even do with this? I doubt it, but I'm no game developer. In my opinion, there's just not as much minigame potential out of hand-eye coordination. Flash Focus might have stood out more and be better remembered if it strayed away from feeling like a worse Brain Age. Alas, Brain Age was a big deal, along with its first sequel, so there it was. Well, it seemed that I lied. There's actually a third game where I never had the manual, which coincidentally is also a Touch Generations title. Finally, I'm talking about Crosswords DES, or maybe Crosswords. Unlike the other 2 games, I actually still don't own this manual. Out of all Touch Generations games, this one is arguably the simplest. It's just crosswords, and word searches, and anagrams. When it comes to the contents of Crosswords DS, I think it's much more enjoyable than it might look. Of course, it's better when you actually like crosswords, word searches, and or anagrams. It might not come as a surprise that I actually enjoy the occasional crossword puzzle, whether physically or digitally. The same goes for word searches. Anagrams are fine, they're just not my thing. Crosswords DS is played by holding the DS sideways. Sound familiar? I told you it was a Touch Generation special. Like the previous 2 games, you have to create a profile. I suppose the profile systems in these games is meant to get the whole family together, but it feels out of place here specifically. Perhaps that's due to the lack of a brain or IH count next to each name. Or it's just a nitpick. The crosswords themselves are, as far as crossword puzzles go, pretty standard. There's plenty easy, medium, and hard difficulties. Personally, I like to stick to the easy ones, especially in a game like this where there is unlimited reviews or I can't just look in the back of the book for the answers. Not that I've ever done that before. Like the other games, the big gimmick here involves a DS touchscreen. You write out each letter just like a real-life newspaper crossword. Way easier though. However, it doesn't always read what I'm writing correctly. Another thing it has in common with Brain Age 2. Not much else to mention in this department. As I said earlier, it's just crosswords on the DS. Everything in this game is self-explanatory, and that includes the word searches and anagrams. You saw them using the touchscreen. Even though I quite like word searches in real life, I find them boring here. The anagrams, similarly, are dull in my opinion. Both of these are definitely just side modes to a decent amount of crossword puzzles. Crosswords DS is a very easy game to understand, so it's the one that I think benefits the most from being on the DS. The touchscreen functionality is what I remember the most from this game. The Touch Generations games are all pretty simple, and these 3 are no exception. I don't hold a lot of nostalgia for any of these games, particularly the one I bought at 17, but I like them about as much as I like Animal Crossing Wild World. These might cause the explosion of casual games on the DS, but unlike some of them, I think all of these are at least good, if not decent. I think, however, that these games in particular show how casual games can vary dramatically in terms of quality. A format that works in one concept might not work out in another, for instance. They contain too much, and yet not enough, in common. And I'm sure that theme won't come up again.